Jason, do you get a feel that there are particular players that, in addition to the obvious star ranking, once you see that a player is a top 10 at their position, they're obviously a huge concern and a huge desire for the football program versus maybe some moderately, I'll say moderately ranked players, but more so taking it a little bit deeper and comparing what's on the roster currently and also what other players are being recruited at that position by Oklahoma. Who would be more of the must-gets? Because if they have to default to Lincoln Riley and his staff to the second guy or the third choice at that position, there's a significant drop-off, as opposed to maybe some other positions where they're looking at four guys and they're all about the same category and they've got them rated just about the same. So if they miss on number one or number two, they're still in good shape. Where who do you think would be the must-haves in this class?
So I think interesting that you bring this up, Mark. So Oklahoma recently had a decommitment of the 2022 class. Wide receiver Jordan Hudson has decommitted from Oklahoma, and he's looking elsewhere at this point. So that's a kid where Oklahoma has traditionally under Riley been very good at the wide receiver position. So I think he's a kid that, he's from the Dallas area, so a big recruiting area for Oklahoma traditionally over years and years and years. But I think Oklahoma has been so strong at the wide receiver position from a recruiting perspective, the fact that they also have two top 10 wide receivers committed in the 2022 class, with Luther Burden, the number one wide receiver in the country in the 2022 class, and Talon Chetron, a local product, another 4-star, number 7 ranked wide receiver overall in the country. So I think that's a position to exactly to your point that, yes, I know that there's a little bit of concern anytime someone decommits, but that's a position where I think Oklahoma is pretty strong. And I know they're looking for another guy to bring in. I think they want to bring in 3 wide receivers in this class. So he's a guy that I think Oklahoma, a position, and another area where Oklahoma will probably add another spot. And I think looking on the team, just in terms of a lot of the 2022 commits, the people that they got, it's heavy offensive line, heavy defensive line. So I think from an offensive line perspective, they're always looking to obviously to create more talent within the team. So there's a lot of offensive linemen for Oklahoma that are here. Jake Taylor is a guy who's the 29th ranked offensive tackle in the country, who's been sort of a pretty heavy lean for Oklahoma. He's the guy that Oklahoma is looking at that could be on commitment watch this weekend. Let's see, another guy that already has committed to Oklahoma is Demetrius Hunter, number 1 center in the country, a top 20 inside offensive lineman. Recruit in the country. He's like I said, he's already a verbal commit to Oklahoma. And then when you look at the defensive line, I think the defensive line is really a position of must for the Sooners, given the fact that we understand that there's so many people that are going to be gone off of this team probably coming into next year. Perion Winfrey is certainly going to be gone. You would think Nick Benito is a guy that could be gone. Isaiah Thomas is a guy that could be gone after this year. So they've got a lot of retooling to do on the defensive line. So I think Gabe Dindy is a really big guy. He's not here this weekend, but he's a guy that's really going to be big for Oklahoma out of Florida. In the battle with Texas A&M, it's kind of funny. Texas A&M has done a really good job from a recruiting perspective with Jimbo Fisher coming in. So it's kind of funny. There was some interesting conversation. I guess Dindy's father is a pastor, and he accepted the pastoral position at College Station at some point. So Dindy has been a pretty heavy Oklahoma lean over the last probably 5-6 months. But I think that people kind of looking into that doesn't certainly look good for Oklahoma if that's the case. And so he's a guy that Oklahoma is looking at. Another guy from a defensive line perspective, Derek Moore, 4-star kid. He's the 12th rated defensive lineman in the country out of Baltimore, Maryland. He's been a heavy OU lean over the last couple of months. He's got about 6 or 7 crystal balls at point with a pretty high confidence rate. He's a guy that I think Oklahoma feels pretty good about, maybe even feels good about maybe securing a commitment this weekend. Let's see, just kind of going through the list, kind of thinking about the defensive line area. Amarya Bohr is another guy, one of the best defensive linemen in the country. Again, he's probably more of a slight OU lean. He's here this weekend. And I think that's an opportunity for him as well, for Oklahoma, looking at that. And I guess the only other area that I would mention that Oklahoma's done a good job at the skill positions on offense, really with the exception of running back. We've talked about this a couple of times, that Oklahoma's missed out on some big time running back, and they've been running back targets that have been commits to Oklahoma for a while, and then kind of flipped late. Jason McClellan a couple of years ago was someone that comes to mind last year. Kamar Wheaton is a guy that wasn't really committed, but most thought that he was kind of a lean to Oklahoma. So there's a couple of guys. I think the biggest guy that they're looking at is Gavin Sawchuck. He's a Texas kid. He's the number 2 ranked running back in the country. Interesting. He's still just a 4-star, but number 2 overall. I'm sorry, he's not a Texas kid. He's from Littleton, Colorado. I got the 2 mixed up. But he's another guy who's pretty heavily OU at this point. He's been through some visits to, I believe, Ohio State, Alabama, Clemson as a recent. So I think the thing that's different, I think, now that you're seeing over the last couple of years, Mark, Oklahoma's battling Alabama, they're battling Clemson, they're battling Ohio State, they're battling Georgia, they're battling these teams that are perennial blue bloods, as opposed to a few years ago when you looked at Oklahoma was not in those battles, was not in those conversations, specifically at the kind of the defensive line position, which is a big area that I think Oklahoma has struggled a bit in the past. So being in that conversation and having kids like the number 1 overall recruit in the 2023 class who is a defensive lineman, having him here on campus just shows that Oklahoma's getting that foot in the door a little bit more with the talent that they have already on campus at the defensive line position.
Jason Ray, last word on college football. So I encourage everybody that's watching, which is about 40 plus right now, check out Jason's work on Last Word on College Football. He and Tony Siracusa, Kevin McGuffey are friends of mine that have been joining us here at the Voice of College Football for quite a long time and do an exceptional job of covering the game that we all love. So regardless of your team, they've got it covered over there on Last Word on College Football. But Oklahoma fans right here, check out Jason's work on Last Word on College Football.